And the doctor called and he's like, hey, I just want you to know that everything I'm looking at is outstanding. I see an improvement. He used a bunch of doctor jargon. I had no idea what he was talking about, but he summed it up. He's like, everything in your brain has improved since the initial scan.
Welcome to Elevate, the gathering spot for first responders, their families, and the communities that support them. We bring you honest conversations and actionable insights, focused on building resilience and finding balance in places we never thought to look. Each episode is your open invitation to broaden your understanding, shed new light on perspectives, and explore new ways to manage the weight we carry. It's about fortifying bonds, welcoming fresh ideas, and acknowledging every step forward. Together, let's elevate. Hello, and welcome back to the Elevate Podcast. I really appreciate that you tuned back in to find out my next guest, who's going to be amazing. He's actually a guest who I know pretty well, and we actually work together. But he's involved with some amazing things. I ran into him at a class that we were both at for mental fatigue class, and I asked him some questions, and he mentioned something about some therapy that he was going through that I'd never heard of before, and I can't wait for him to share that with you. Plus, he's involved with some pretty awesome stuff. So before we go any further, make sure you like, subscribe, share. If you hear this message and you feel that you resonate or someone else resonates with this, please share this podcast with them. Just hit the share button. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the bell so you get notifications when we put new episodes on, and when we go live, that you'll get notifications that we go live, because we're going to go live soon. It's just something I'm building up to. So before I go any further, let me introduce my guest, Dusty Wachenschwanz. Right? I always say it wrong. I know, Dusty. I'm so sorry. Say it for me. Wachenschwanz. I don't know. I've known you for how many years? 5 or 6 years now. And I just, how many of us don't say it right? All of us.
Smith. Right? Pronounce it Smith. Yeah.
Smith. Dusty Smith, everybody, just spelled with a W.
Yeah.
Achen. So this is Dusty Wachenschwanz, and I will let him tell you all about himself and what led him to these different areas that we're going to talk about. And just go ahead and share with the audience of who you are, what you're about, what your background is. I know you did more before you came into EMS, so go ahead and share all that with everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. My name's Dusty Wachenschwanz. I grew up in Southeast Ohio. Grew up on a horse farm. Best friend had a dairy beef operation, so I grew up on the farm life. I originally wanted to be a veterinarian, and went to school for that, and got out, was working in the field, and they offered free EMS training for their coworkers, their employees. And so I went to basic school and got a job part-time doing that, private ambulance. And then they had a program to where you become a paramedic. I was like, cool, let's do that. Do some more fun stuff. Became a paramedic, and that was back in 2016-ish. So not too long ago, coming up on 10 years.
Yeah, about the same time I came back to the county. Yeah.
So got involved in that, worked several private ambulances, got a job at the county, Delaware County, and also do some precepting with different paramedic programs, grant, and CTEC.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's how I got into EMS.
That's great. And are you a firefighter too, or what's going on with that? I think you're in fire school, aren't you?
Yeah, so my wife is a firefighter medic, and so she kind of the nudge to take the lead. And I'm doing fire school right now, and I'm not as young as everybody else, and it's rough. It's rough.
You're still younger than me, and I still get people recruiting me.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, I'm doing that just for fun. Work some part-time fire job with her, so get a little interested.
That's right. Well, you're in the same boat as I am when it comes to the double whammy. What I consider the double whammy is a husband and wife, both in the medical field / first. You guys are 2 first responders. My wife's a nurse and on the front lines of pediatric care. Mm-hmm. So it's a weird world, isn't it? You know, it's good and bad, right? So
it's good you can share. So
yeah. It's good that they know where you're coming from, and there's no loss of understanding. But then it provides a whole nother layer of issues that could pop up, in general. So you have kids?
Not that I know of.
No. All right.
Yeah, no kids, just
No
two
kids.
dogs. Two dogs.
Well, heck, I got 4 dogs, and they're a lot of work. They're almost like kids anyhow. So,
Yeah.
well, thanks so much for introducing yourself and how you got to this path. And thank you for what you do every day when you work on an opposite duty day. You cover people people that I love in that part of the county. So I appreciate you being there for them. And the fact that you're going back to fire school and spreading your wings a little bit, kind of leads to why I wanted to have you on the podcast. Because now you're going to be doubling up on all the stressors that all first responders deal with. We deal with stressors on the EMS side of things. And then when you become a firefighter, you're going to get different stressors and some of the same stressors depending on what your role is that day when it comes to the way that our fire departments work. If anybody out there doesn't understand how our fire departments work here in Central Ohio, is you basically need to be a firefighter paramedic to be a firefighter. So, or a firefighter basic EMT. You still have to have an EMT. So you can be on the truck as a firefighter, or you can be on the medic as a first responder in the EMS world. So it's kind of like a double whammy. So, tell us a little bit more about, other than your wife saying, "Hey, I'm a firefighter, go be one, be like me, be like Mike." No, like other than that, like, did you have any like early desires to become a firefighter too, or?
No, I never wanted to be a firefighter. When I was younger, my brother actually died in a fire, and so growing up,
Oh, wow.
I was scared of fire. Um, I mean, bonfire is completely different, but the whole concept of firefighting kind of scared me. And when I met my
Wow.
wife, that's what she does, and so that was part of the reason I went ahead and took this leap to do the fire class, was to understand and appreciate what she does. And so
Wow.
since taking the class, I've learned a lot. They don't just run in and
Right.
jump in the fire.
Yeah.
There's actually tactics to it, and they have the
Yeah,
protective
absolutely. Yeah.
clothing,
It's not,
and so yeah.
yeah. I read a book the other day of a firefighter from Charleston who rescued tried to rescue the Charleston Nine,
Hmm.
and they called it cowboy firefighting, and that's not what like they wouldn't use SCBA sometimes, and they one person on a ladder where it needs to be three. Everything has changed since the Charleston Nine, of course, but yeah, so it's good that you got in there and learned more about the science of fire and the science of fighting a fire, and I think that we do a really good job of that here in Central Ohio with the programs that we offer, because we have several programs.
Oh,
So I'm proud of you to doing it, and I explored it when I first came into the county, but I was probably a little older than you were when I came into it, because I'm 52 now, and I've been with the county since I was 35, and I was already banged up, and I'm like, I'm not doing this. So, well, that's interesting. So your little brother died in a fire as your little brother or as a firefighter? I'm sorry, I want to make sure I get that clear.
no, no, no. So I was little. It was my older brother.
Okay,
He
older brother. I'm sorry, older earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, he was 9 years older than me, and I was in
Okay.
fourth grade. And
Okay.
it's just a camper caught fire, and he
Okay.
was
Okay.
involved in it. So
Okay. All right. I didn't know if he was older than you and then was a firefighter and
mhm.
unfortunately passed away early in his career or something like that. So, okay. So, but yeah, that kind of stems off of some of the issues that I face here and that I confront on the Elevate podcast, is that childhood trauma. That childhood trauma plays a big role in our industry. If we don't understand childhood trauma, which I did not when I went through my issues, I didn't understand childhood trauma, and it was directly linked to a childhood trauma of mine that I didn't even realize that even was in there anymore. So for you to face your fears and to face that trauma that you experienced, at a young age, that's huge. That's bigger than even things that we're going to talk about, later on in the podcast. So I applaud you for doing what you're doing and facing that, and and being vulnerable and being upfront about it, and knowing what we know now about mental health and mental wellness. I'm proud of you that you're doing that, and by any stretch of means, you've always got a mental brother in arms with me, man, if you ever need anything. Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to bring you on with was during that class that we took together, which was a great class. It was too short. It was kind of a blip. It was kind of a sprinkle of what we deal with, and it was good information, but it was almost like it left me wanting more. And then I turned to you and I was like, "Why you here?" And you're like, "Because I'm going through some stuff right now, and been going through some stuff, and I'm trying to get some clarity." And then you mentioned that you and your wife are both part of a program that called eTMS. And it really intrigued me because how you described it that day, I was like, what newfangledness is this? Because another thing that we like to do on the Elevate podcast is bring our listeners different ways of dealing with the traumas or the situations and the weight that we carry. It's not all about talk therapy. That's my big thing is I bring them different avenues that they can explore and research and find out and learn more from our guests, and maybe even reach out to our guest, information if they allow, if they want to know more about the subject or the subject that they're talking about, and get them to open to see that there's more than just a counselor or a therapist, because that's a four-letter word in our industry. We're bred to be tough as nails but what people don't understand is we don't ever train for the backside of it. And I'm wanting to change that. I think you're wanting to change that with the things that you've got going on. With this, the second thing we want to talk about later on, which is really awesome. I can't wait to come out and see it. But tell us about this eTMS and how you got turned on to that, and tell us about like what you thought about it before you did it, and then give us a post analysis, because I think you're done now, right?
Yeah. So yeah, before I got into eTMS, with all the childhood trauma, the brother dying, PTSD, depression, anxiety. So I was bouncing from counselor to counselor. I went to a few different programs, the First Responders Bridge,
Mm-hmm.
um, the Phoenix Project, and I got introduced to EMDR.
Yep. That's what
EMDR.
I
I,
went through.
I always
Yeah,
confuse the
yeah.
word.
Yeah, EMDR is what I went through on the backside of my trauma, and it was great. I mean, and at the time, that's the only thing I knew that was available. And then I met you I saw you at that class. So,
Yeah. So I did the light therapy, and it worked to a point. I felt myself calming down a little bit, less emotional, less quick to anger. Uh, but it wasn't. There was no permanent effect. It was very short lived,
mm,
and a friend reached out, which at the place we'll talk about later, and he was like, "Hey, have you heard of this?" And I was like, "I have no idea." eTMS, electro. We were talking about this electroencephalogram transcranial magnetic stimulation,
that's
and
a
I
that's a
was,
mouthful.
yeah, I was like,
so
what
so as from this point forward, ETMS. We will never.
eTMS? Yeah.
I will put the link in all of it down below, of course, of how it's actually spelled and places that you can do some research on it. But yeah, ETMS from this point forward.
eTMS. And in my mind, I'm like, somebody's going to electrocute my head. That's
It's
what the hell.
what they call lobotomy. Is that the
Yeah,
one flew over the cuckoo's nest thing? I'm like, oh God, is that what
yeah.
this is?
And I was skeptic, and I got talking to them, and they had already started it. And what it is, it's let me read my notes here. The Ohio House Bill 110 made this program free to all fire, EMS, law enforcement, and veterans. And which is weird. It's free for us. It was originally designed and created and tested for children with disabilities,
Okay.
autism, Downs, different things like that. And what it does is imagine a brake pad for your truck. It's a little magnet shaped like that. It goes right here on your forehead, and it's hooked up to a machine, and it clicks, and it does something, and it rewires the alpha rays or whatever,
hmm
the
The
waves in
alpha
your,
waves, the
yeah,
alpha waves. Yeah. Yep.
waves, and it rewires your brain is the
Okay.
simplest way to explain it. And I was like, holy crap.
Oh
And
yeah. Like what kind?
Yeah.
What kind of futuristic weird stuff is this, right?
Yeah. And so I called them up and they're like, yeah, sure, come on and talk. I was talking to their liaison, and he's a veteran. And imagine Hulk Hogan with a fanny pack. This guy was pretty awesome. And
Listen here, brother.
and he's explaining this, and I was like, this is actually really cool. He's laying everything
Okay.
out, all these good results. And so I signed up to do it, and I filled out a medical questionnaire. I had a nurse call me. I had the doctor call me, and he was confirming everything. He's like, all right, everything's good to go. Let's start you.
So you have to kind of qualify for it, or not be disqualified mainly.
Yeah, there's some contraindications.
Seizures, maybe. Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what they are,
Okay.
but you have to meet some requirements. But I did my medical questionnaire. I went in and I did an EEG where they put the patches
Right.
in your head. They measure your
The
brain waves.
smelly patches. Yep.
Yep.
You'll never not forget that smell ever.
No. And so they got like a baseline set of my brain waves, and I in the beginning you do all these little surveys, little quiz games, like the mind games or whatever. Like on the tablet, you play these games. Imagine that, and they're testing your memory, they're testing your response and everything. And come to find out, they use that throughout this program to track your progress.
Okay.
And
They get a baseline. Okay.
yeah,
That
they
makes sense.
do this baseline. And so started the treatment, and they prefer you to do it 5 days a week, Monday through Friday.
Wow, that's a commitment.
Yeah, and it's approximately 30 minutes or so. You know, when they do the EEG and the quizzes, it takes a little longer, but a normal
The initial,
treatment,
right.
lasted 30 minutes. I spent more time driving than I did in the program.
Gotcha.
But you
So
said
no side effects after it, like no, like, okay, you have to sit for 20 minutes or no dizziness or anything like that?
no. And so I would go to my treatment. So again, it was Monday. They wanted to do Monday through Friday for approximately 6 weeks. It has since changed a little bit. But anyway, I would go 3 to 4 times a week. I would leave work, administration let me leave work. And so I would go to my treatment and I would sit in a recliner. They'd put the brake pad on my head. I'd lean back. That's the best way to describe it. I'd recline. They'd put it on there, and it was like a clicking, tapping on your forehead. And
Any audios too, or?
Nope. It's just
Okay.
a pad that goes on your head, the magnet, and you could recline. They'd turn the lights out. You'd sit there.
Probably fell asleep.
There was a few times I did.
Yeah. I know me. If
Yeah.
I'm not moving my feet or moving my mouth, I'm asleep. So
Yep. And
hence podcasts. No.
yeah. But yeah, you just hung out there, and when you were done, you got snacks. They always had the good snacks, the good bars, drinks, and you'd come back the next day. And
Do they monitor you during this time, like your blood pressure and pulse rate or anything like that? No?
yeah, before each treatment, you get your
Okay,
blood
but not like
pressure.
during it. So it's not
Yeah.
something that it's going to affect anything medically on you when it's happening. Okay.
No. It's non-invasive. It's just literally a click on your forehead. You feel that click, that pressure, but it's all magnetic waves.
Okay.
So yeah, they would do your vitals beforehand. You know, they would ask you. One of the things is they wanted you to get a certain amount of sunlight in the mornings. Between
Okay. Well, that's a good thing anyhow, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and they wanted you to
Vitamin D.
yeah, they wanted you to go to bed early and limit your screen time before bed
Of
to
course. Well,
allow
that's just
your
great. That's
yeah,
just good information.
yeah. And
Right.
so I started doing that. I had sunlight in the morning anyway, but
Right.
I was limiting my screen time at night, put my phone down, not watching TV. We would just lay in bed, and it was the first week, and I started noticing I was going to bed earlier. I was falling asleep faster and staying asleep longer.
Okay.
And prior to this treatment, sleeping was very difficult for me. It would
Okay.
be after midnight before I would fall asleep. I'd wake up several times, nightmares, and it was just rough.
Mm.
And so the first week to see that kind of result was
Yeah.
awesome.
Boom. Right.
And
And you had 5 more weeks of this.
yeah, I had longer to go, and periodically you would do a repeat EEG. You would do repeat quizzes, the little games, and the games there was progress. Everything was improving, my reaction time, my memory, and the EEG. I didn't speak to the doctor because he talks to you in the beginning and the end, so I didn't know the result of the brain scan. But at the end of the program, it was great. Like I said, I was sleeping better, going to sleep early, staying asleep, no nightmares. And with that, I felt rested. I had more energy. I was calmer, which was a thing for me. I was always
So did you have issues with anxiety too
yeah,
with all this? Like even conscious anxiety, not just nightmares and stuff,
yeah,
but anxiety
yeah,
in general? Okay.
yeah, anxiety in general, and zero nightmares. That was a big thing for me too. I was constantly having
Yeah. So
faith.
you were still getting into REM, but you wouldn't have nightmares. Did you still dream though? It didn't like
Um,
wipe out dreams, did it?
I would have occasional dreams that I could remember, and they
Okay.
weren't bad. They were pleasant dreams.
Right,
And
right.
so, so sleep was better. My mood was better. I don't remember getting angry at all. And before that,
Wow.
I was quick to anger and calmer. Um, and it was weird. Like I was having less pain, and so
Physical pain.
physical pain, like bad knees, bad shoulders, which fire school's not helping. Um,
Yeah.
but like I noticed I wasn't popping a leave or Tylenol or anything throughout the day like I was. Like I was less pain. It was great.
Mhm.
And at the end of the program, the repeat EEG, the repeat quizzes, and the doctor called and he's like, "Hey, I just want you to know that everything I'm looking at is outstanding. I see an improvement." He used a bunch of doctor jargon. I had no idea what he was talking about, but he summed it up. He's like, "Everything in your brain has improved since the initial scan."
Wow.
And I
Now
was,
when they do that scan, is it they see waves? It's not the color scan that we've seen on brain scans, right? It's not that one, right?
no, it's the wave,
Okay. Okay.
strictly the
It's the
waves.
wave. Okay. Great.
But I was thoroughly impressed with it. My wife went through the treatment, um, and I know 4 or 5 people that have went through the treatment as well, and they have seen similar results.
Fantastic.
Not everything I've had. They've maybe missed a couple, and another guy had the stuff
Right.
that they were missing, but it was all those same results: improved sleep, better
See,
mood.
and that's I'm so glad that we're talking about this on the podcast because it's something that people can go and look into. I asked you before we got on a week ago or so when we set this up, is this an Central Ohio thing or is this a national thing? And the good news is that it's a national program, right?
It's everywhere. The guy that drafted me into it drafted. Um, he goes to Washington D.C. and lobbies.
Okay.
He's from the West Coast. Like he travels throughout the country doing this. Like that's his job.
Oh, that's his job. Okay. All right.
That's his job. And so since at the facility, because the place you do it is in Worthington, the south of Worthington fire station.
For here, yeah.
But they got another guy there, 2 guys that branch out through Ohio and do recruiting. They spread the word. They get people signed up. And it is a busy place. There's 2 or 3 gals in there. You go in the office, and like I said, they do it for children with disabilities. And so you come into the office, and that's what you see is you see these
Mm.
children there with disabilities, and you make small chat with mom or dad sitting there waiting, and they're like, "This is amazing. Like my son or my daughter has improved just 2 weeks into this program."
Wow.
And so
Okay.
it's not just working for adults; it's working for kids with these disabilities. And so it's amazing. It's the best thing
Wow.
I've ever came across.
That's cool. So yeah, so it's It's eTMS. We'll put the link below of how to find information, and I'm sure there's a national database that someone can type into and find if they're where their local office is, and websites and whatnot will all be in the description. Anything else you want to say about that? I mean, before we get into the other thing that you're involved in, even prior to eTMS.
Yeah, so it's I guess marketing is a bad word, but it's designed for, and I'm going to read off some stuff here: PTSD, traumatic brain injury, concussions, depression, anxiety, sleep disorders, and substance abuse.
Oh,
There were yeah,
substance abuse. So
substance abuse. There
okay.
were quite a few first responders in there with substance abuse issues, and veterans as
Which is
well.
we know that it's 30% higher likelihood of substance abuse in the first responder world,
Yeah,
let alone a veteran that is also a first responder. That's probably even more. So
yeah.
we have a lot of elevated percentages of all the bad stuff, and that's one reason why the Elevate podcast came about to try to change those.
Yeah, and so it's marketed for those. And the best thing, and I didn't find out till later, almost when I was done, is they do reimbursements for massages,
Oh,
chiropractors, acupuncture,
a
and
whole
so
wellness. Yeah.
yeah, and so as part of the wellness program, you could go get a massage every week, and they would reimburse you for
Wow.
it to help
That's
you.
cool.
And like I said, I didn't find out till later. My wife took full advantage.
Okay, so if I'm on the backside of things being fixed for me, like is what like what do I have? What major problem can I build up to? No, I'm just kidding. No.
And no, they do a follow up treatment as well. And so I'm
Yeah, that was
going.
going to be actually that was going to be my next question is is it 6 weeks and done, or do you do like monthly brush ups, or
So it's like I said, it's changed since I've went through it, but I believe it's a 4 week or maybe another 6 week follow up that you can do at any time. You got to schedule to get on the book, you go through the treatment again.
okay.
And so the people that I know have went back and done it, and they're like, it's fantastic. We didn't notice. They were saying that they didn't notice a decrease in their improvement, but it just kind of plateaued. And then when they went back, it improved again. And so
Wow.
there's not been any loss of what they've gained, and it's that's amazing.
Just benefits. Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, this is great information, everybody that's listening. One of those things where, where someone has tried something and it didn't work. EDMR did work for me, and it has worked long term so far. I haven't been involved with the trigger that I was triggered on again, but I am able to talk about it and discuss it and share information and talk about it without getting triggered. Now, I haven't been on a run of that type yet since, but so who knows what'll happen. But good news is I raised my hand pretty early. I didn't get into months and years of turmoil. I knew something was wrong right away. Things were weird for me for a couple of weeks, and then I had another series of events of a similar fashion, and it was just like, okay, this is overwhelming. I need help. Raise my hand, and got a mentor to come talk to me and do things and introduce me to EDMR. So EMDR. So, but yeah, this is great. eTMS is something that was new to me, new to Dusty here, who had been in other type of therapies, which we're going to talk about. So you also, to switch gears now, are involved with equine therapy. And you've been around horses your whole life, I take it, or like tell me more about the equine therapy and when you started that and where that has led you.
Yeah. So
Oh, awesome.
I grew up on horseback
So
showing.
for those just listening and not watching the video, he went to the side and there was a beautiful painting of some horse behind him for that he's a horse guy. So
Yeah. So I grew up on horseback showing training. Went to school for it. I originally wanted to be a vet, and then things changed. But I've always loved horses. And when I was in medic school, my instructor brought up a barn that he was going to called Stockhands Horses for Healing in Delaware. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's cool. I grew up with horses. And he said, yeah, we have a first responders program. Everybody's welcome. It is completely free. And I was like, cool. I like free. I like horses. Sign me up.
Right.
And so I went out to it and got on the horse, and everything was great. I had went years without being around horses when I was in school and working, and everything just fell back into place. There's a special calming with horses.
Absolutely.
People say dogs are the best therapy, but mm, yeah.
Horse people would have something. I grew up around horses too, so I get it. I never rode horses, I never showed them, but I was always around because my grandfather was the general manager of a local thoroughbred racetrack here in Central Ohio, down in Grove City. So
Okay.
it was called Beulah Park Racetrack, Darby Downs, and it went back to Beulah Park, and now it's not there anymore. But it wasn't the harness racing, but I remember many times being with my grandparents and going to the track and being with grandpa all day and walking around and helping wash the horses and be around it. So I grew up around horses, and you're right. I mean, when I look back at those times, it was always great to go be around the horses because they're just these big, majestic animals that are just, they could stomp you if they wanted to, but they're just so loving and interested and they know you, like they get excited when they see you. So yeah, tell me more about it though when it comes to the therapy sessions.
Yeah. So Stockhands, it was founded and started by a Marine vet um, that did like a lesson, like a little riding lesson, and the little kid he did it with had, I believe it was autism, and something clicked in him when he got done with the lesson, and the little boy held his hand when he was walking away, and the mom started crying and informed him that he doesn't do that. And
Okay.
so to see a change in a child that has a disability, you know is something special. And so that sparked him. He went in with another person who is now his wife, and so together they run Stockhands, Tim and Lisa Funk. And so they created this barn. It's equine-assisted therapy, and their primary thing is riding lessons for children with disabilities. And so that's Sunday through Thursday. Kids are there all day, all evening. It's a nonprofit establishment, completely ran by volunteers. Um, they have the first responders program, the veterans program. They have addiction programs out there,
Okay.
children at risk programs. They have different read with the horses, and so kids can come out there and read with the horses. Halloween events, Christmas events. They do a mash food pantry, and so they use the
Okay.
big draft horses to plow a garden, grow
Okay.
vegetables, and then donate it to the mash pantry so veterans can get food.
Wow. Yeah.
And
These people sound like they've already got their place in sainthood. That's for sure.
yeah, and it's great. So I started going there for the first responders program, the veterans program, and then I started. I was talking to Tim, and he's like, you ride all the time. You know what you're doing. Would you be interested in teaching lessons? And so I was like,
Okay.
absolutely. And so I started to be an instructor, and so I was teaching every Thursday, and the kids were amazing. And so, you know, kids with physical and mental disabilities, to see them evolve week by week, it's special. A child that can barely walk and is now walking on their own without assistance due to the physical movement of the horse, the therapy it does for your muscles and your joints. To another student that doesn't talk, doesn't touch anybody, and to have them give you a high five and to whisper something in your ear. That's
That's yeah. Oh man, I can only imagine. Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. I've worked with disability children and adults actually in my younger years too. My next door neighbor was in charge of the Special Olympics. So she recruited me when I was in high school to come and help with mentally and physically disabled people. And that it's humbling. It's exciting when you see a smile on their face because they're happy to be there. So I can only imagine it's the same stuff. So I guess what keeps on coming into my mind right now is, so you were involved with Stockhands, which is a Central Ohio facility. They're not national, correct? But there's probably other programs out there, right?
Yeah, they're just in Delaware. There are numerous barns across the state,
Okay.
across the
Cross.
nation that do
Okay.
equine-assisted therapy.
Okay.
So
So it's something that people can find if they hear this and they live in, Idaho. Yeah. Which
yeah,
they're already dealing with horses there anyhow, but
yeah, it's
but
everywhere. Yeah.
okay. So I guess what my next question is so you were involved with that for how long before the eTMS?
2 or 3 years.
Okay, so
Yeah,
2 or 3 years. Okay.
yeah. I
So
was
I guess this is so my point is that, you would think that what you were getting at this equine therapy could have been the answer, but it seemed like you were still having nightmares because of the deep-seated trauma, and you needed something more. So I just want to make sure that if people are still in a funk, no pun intended with the funks that run the program, but if people are still in a funk, when they're doing something that they feel should be helping them, it doesn't mean that that's the end all be all. And I want to get that message across to our listeners to make sure that they understand that it's, you were involved with something that you loved and you were still having nightmares. So, and you were still getting fulfillment, but then when you were by yourself, it sounds like it wasn't enough, and you had to go to that next level because of the deep-seated trauma that you felt for whatever reason. So, I want to make sure people don't lose hope on whatever they're doing. If they are raising their hand and saying, I need to do something, I'm doing something, but it's still not working, try something else. Try to do it in addition to. Doesn't, if we have 10 things that we do on a daily basis that keeps us on the straight and narrow when it comes to all the different things that we face, I don't think that's a problem. So and what do you have to say about that? Like, what did you feel? What did you feel when it came to the equine therapy, and then needing or wanting to go to eTMS? Was there any kind of conflict within you, or like issues?
so backing up to the equine therapy. Like when I was at the barn, I was calm. I didn't have any issues. The horses grounded me. It was just the when I went home,
Mm,
I had the issue. And so growing up with it, I didn't think anything of it as being a possible solution to my problem. Um, but there are people that come there that it is the solution. They come there
right, and it can
multiple,
be, yeah,
yeah, it is the answer to their question, and it works
right,
for them. But everybody's different. Everybody's absolutely
of
different.
course.
And it was just a stepping stone. It elevated me to elevate. Um, it it elevated me. That's how I found out about the eTMS was people at the barn. They brought
People
up,
at the
they were
barn.
like, hey,
Okay.
and here's a resource, here's a tool for you to use, and that tool
Right.
worked for me. And the big thing at the barn is, and you and everybody else know, there's a stigma involved in asking for help.
Yep.
And at the barn,
Unfortunately.
there's no questions asked. It's we don't pry, we don't
Yeah.
poke, we
You can
don't
tell
grill
your story if
you.
you feel you need. They don't need it. It's not
No,
required. Right.
you are a stock hand. You're there, you're
Right.
helping,
Right.
and if you can tell when something's
Yeah.
going on, and you can just bring something up, be like, hey, I started doing this, or my friend started doing this, and it puts the bug in people's ear. And then
Mhm.
it'll be a month later, 2 months later, and they come back and be like, hey, remember when you talked about that? I did it, and it worked.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
that's
Yeah, and and I'm glad you mentioned about the stigma, especially in our industry, because there's so many stigmas internally and externally, and I've said it before on the pardon me, oh excuse me, drinking that water, saying it before on the podcast that that part of getting rid of the stigma is understanding that, we're human, and that it's not a sign of failure or lack of strength. In my opinion, the mental fortitude that we can provide ourselves at this point in time in our career should have been provided to us 20 years ago, 16 years ago, 10 years ago, in our training, and it's not. And it's starting to be sprinkled now into our EMS training. The National Registry actually has a place for it, but it's not regulated yet enough to where it's kind of still left up to the individual schools and academies. So, when it comes to fortifying ourselves, and we're playing catch up. Everybody in this industry right now who's been in it for more than 5 years is playing catch up and trying to figure out how we can sustain, because I've said it before, we're having recruitment problems. We're having actual problems of keeping retention in this industry, in the first responder world in general, both fire, EMS, police, dispatchers. Dispatchers have such a turnover rate, unfortunately, and they're first responders. Come on, guys. There's debate out there that they're not first responders. They're first responders all the way. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have some of the saves that we have, or the information we need when we go into places that it would be even worse without their information. So to me, they're just an extension of what we do, and they see more than they hear more than what we do, because we're there and getting closure and physically doing something. They're mentally doing something, but sometimes that's not a great thing. But I want to make sure that people know that this stigma is something that I get angry with when it comes to the fact that we have it in this industry, and I want to try to destroy it as much as possible without getting angry with people that still have it, but because I don't want to be that guy. But, when they're backed up against the wall, everybody will eventually say, I just don't feel right, especially if they, have loved ones in in their life, or they've gone through loss or what have you. You eventually have to reach out to someone, and don't let what you have in your brain affect you to not raise your hand, knowing that if we can mentally say, hey, I want to learn how to be stronger mentally, that's all you need. That's you don't have to say I've got a problem. Just say, hey, listen, I want to learn how to be a little more mentally prepared for things that I'm going to see. That's a good way of easing into the situation of learning about different alternate therapies, for lack of better terms, or tools like you mentioned earlier. That eTMS was a tool that they provided to you. Plenty of tools out there. EMDR, mindfulness, that's another tool. Self-care is another tool. So just anything else that you want to say about the subject of the two topics that we talked about today? If not, we can wrap things up and go on.
Yeah, that's just ignore the stigma. If you have an issue, if you think you have an issue, take advantage of all the resources available. There's so much developing right now. The eTMS, it worked for me. It's worked for others, but it's a tool you can use. Equine therapy, if you're in the Delaware, Ohio area, we've got people coming from Buckeye Lake and from an hour away that come to our program. It's absolutely free. It's essentially peer support. It's let those around you help you.
Right.
And
And that's what they found with first responders, is when it's peer support, it's more acceptable,
mhm.
because, hey, wait a second, here's a guy that's like me, who's gone through stuff like me, and I can relate. And that's all everything's about relatability. When it comes to first responders, we like to learn from from other first responders. We like to know that other first responders, have been through issues and now are on the backside. So, the main thing is don't ever think that you won't find someone in the first responder world that can assist you. Even if someone's trying to be a tough guy and say the wrong things, most likely inside they're probably dealing with the same thing you're dealing with. So
the generations are changing. People are
yeah.
talking more, and it's not Mr. Macho tough guy. Yeah.
I mean, I'm fine with the physical macho tough guy stuff, but you still need to understand how to unpack it. I mean, you still need to understand where to plug things in, and you know what, this doesn't feel right. I'm going to go grab this little tool and utilize it, or what have you. And if we're taught that in the beginning, I think it's not making a weaker group of first responders. It's making a stronger group of first responders, because ultimately, when you're not with it and you're serving the community and you're not all there from everything that you've learned to do the physical and the mental things to help a patient or to help a community, if you're not with it, you're not really there with helping him in the way that you wanted to, and the way you planned to do it when you became a first responder. So the physical strength and mental strength is so tied together now. And I think that's another message that I know that Dusty would like to make sure that we get across, as long with me. I know Dusty and I've had more conversations than just this one, and we're on the same page. We're actually going to, you mentioned the Phoenix Project. I'm not sure when this will air. It may have already happened, but the Phoenix Project is April 26th in Columbus, Ohio. I've actually got a meeting with one of the founders later on tonight to finish up his podcast. But he says he's not going to turn people away if people show up at one church on Hamilton Road in Gahanna. So Phoenix Project is a wonderful thing. We have several things here. Ohio does things pretty good. Our department does things. I mean, they allow you to have the time. They cover you. We have different things that cover our first responders. I know that in the past, I've covered for people that need to have gone to different things that they needed to for their family or their marriage. And we're a family, and we need to come together and support each other and not stigmatize each other anymore. So, well, Dusty, once again, thanks for coming on. I think you gave us two incredible things, both of them. Find your local equine therapy. If you're not in Central Ohio, just look up equine therapy. I don't know if there's a national database. If there is, eventually I'll get it into the show notes. But when it comes to eTMS, all the information will be below to describe more about eTMS. I'm not sure if you have anything that you want to promote or talk about other than the equine centers. Feel free to, Dusty. If not, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit that bell so you get notifications. And if something resonated with you, or you feel that someone needs to hear this message, please don't hesitate to share it with people. Dusty, anything else before we roll?
No. If you're thinking about equine therapy, do it. Get some saddle time. The horse is better than the dog.
Now, how many dogs are at the equine therapy place too, though? So you can get your double dose.
There's 3. They're cattle dogs, so they're crazy.
Yeah, exactly. All right, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in to the Elevate podcast, and appreciate you tuning in, and take care. Thanks, Dusty.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for this episode of Elevate. Brought to you by Frontline Empowerment Solutions, your partner in building resilience and fostering continued growth. If you found something valuable today, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who could use it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our next conversation. We're here to bring you more stories and insights, all aimed at strengthening the first responder community. Together, let's keep elevating each other, one episode at a time.